Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. Today, we are very fortunate to have both Christine Heath and Dicken with us. Both are on the board of the 3PGC, and both had the opportunity to work directly or to learn directly from Sidney Banks. So thank you both for being willing to do this webinar, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie.
I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with everybody, in particular to be doing this with my good friend Christine. Really good.
Even though we have no idea what we're doing.
We haven't talked, so you'll be able to see how things can come fresh in the moment when you trust that whole process.
Yeah.
We decided to call this Understanding Can Open the Door to Global Change. I mean, when I started my career as a high school teacher, and then even later as practicing as a psychologist, I had no idea that we could each learn something through insight that would shift our own level of consciousness, that would not only affect us, but would affect the overall level of consciousness of the whole world. So right away, what occurred to me just a few minutes ago, the word hope popped into my head, because there's so much discouragement and despair. People being able to see through the news and on the internet, being able to see the violence in the world, the way people are treating themselves poorly, conflicts, and more recently being so much more aware of the state of the Earth's climate. It's very easy to get disheartened, discouraged, despair. Sometimes people feel like just dealing with my own problems is plenty for me. How am I going to have any bandwidth to deal with something bigger? And I can just tell you, and I know Chris shares this sentiment, that the time we spent around this welder with a 9th grade education, who had a deeper understanding about why, as we gain understanding, we will live with more hope. We will become able to see life clearly as it is and still have enormous hope for ourselves and for the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we may talk about this later, but those of us on the board at 3PGC have been touched so deeply by this hope that we wanted to offer a global, first time ever we've tried to pull this one off, a global online conference. It's going to be February 28th through March 1st. And we're going to have speakers, three principal practitioner speakers spanning the globe as we go around the globe, and people addressing this very topic. So Chris and I volunteered on the board to give people a little bit of an intro to this topic. And for us, since we had we were so blessed to have so much time with Syd Banks, and the more I spent time around him, the more I had hope for myself, my family, my kids, my friends, and it kept expanding. Then my community, and now the world. Syd says this: you gain a deeper understanding into the universal principles of mind, consciousness, and thought. And you literally can help create shifts that affect the whole world. He said it's a journey it's a journey of love. He says it starts in love and it ends in pure love. And he says that this deeper love is the answer to every single human problem. I want to sort of start off today. There's one quote that just, ever since Chris and I agreed to do this, all I knew was I wanted to share this one quote from you, and it was from a very, very early tape of Syd Banks. Chris, it was from a talk he gave at Courtney many, many years ago.
Mhm.
And you can see how after Syd sort of woke up to the nature of the principles, how he immediately had hope for the world. And you can see it reflected in this quote. This quote I've come back to over and over again, especially in the past few years, especially the more deeply I understand the principles, the more deeply I'm falling in love with the trees and the birds and the planet and the ocean that's right out my window. I put a bird feeder right out in front of me. I watch birds all day long, beautiful trees here in the Pacific Northwest, and then to see the ways in which the environment is being destroyed or damaged, burning up. I keep coming back to the understanding I've gained over the years. And Chris and I will say more about that, and even in really practical ways, it's been helpful in terms of responding to life from a place of love and understanding, mm-hmm. rather than responding to life out of fear and judgment and upset. Very, very powerful. So here's the quote. To direct people back inside, right? Inside, just beyond all of our personal thinking. That's all it means. Sue would say it's not inside your body. It's just beyond the physical. It's just, in particular, psychologically, it's beyond our ideas and thoughts and concepts. That's inside, it's formless. To direct people back inside is the only way we will ever have harmony in the world. There is no way peace and harmony can come to the world via the conscious mind. Thinking about problems with my wife didn't lead to greater love and understanding in our relationship. Mm-hmm. Thinking about problems with family did not help get to a place of insight and understanding. Thinking about the problems of the world can very, very easily lead me to despair if I keep going in that direction. Mm-hmm. Right? So here's Syd saying, there's no way peace and harmony can come to the world via the conscious mind. There is no answer from outside what's already been formed, including our ideas and beliefs and the ideas and beliefs of other people. There is no answer from outside, but if we travel inside and start to realize that all of life is a conscious state, and as we get into this divine state, right, let's not make it too mysterious. It's very ordinary. It's the deep now. It's we all at times touch this space, the deep now, the quiet place within, free of our personal thinking, or as Syd would say, free from the contamination of our personal concepts and ideas and beliefs. If we travel inside and start to realize that all of life is a conscious state, and as you get into this divine state, the world will change around you. And you go into harmony, happiness, tranquility, peace, love, and understanding. Put them all together, and it's what the Bible calls God. Because God is the purest of love. Now, he's not talking religious here. He's just using that word to be the all-inclusive reality of life. You can call it mind, universal mind. It is what the Bible calls God because God is the purest of love. Only this love can solve the world's problems. You must raise the level of consciousness of mankind. So I just wanted to sort of introduce this topic and say, Chris and I are really talking about how understanding leads to love and leads to hope and leads to new perspectives and new ideas and a responsive intelligence that is constantly moving us in life toward thriving as opposed to hatred and violence and destroying the environment. That it's built into us for this. It's already built into us. We have to get out of the way and get into that place where this is possible. Well, I have a lot more to say about this, but I want to throw it back over to Chris at this point.
Well, as you were talking, what I was reminded of was just how much hope Syd had for this understanding to help the world. That he was always on the edge, waiting for it to go big. You know, like he would tell us, any minute now. And this is when, you know, there were maybe 20 of us, right? And we're like, okay, we're ready. And then we get like, oh man, nobody's listening and it's not going anywhere. And he'd say, oh no, it'll go out in psychology. And we wait for psychologists to show up, and they didn't. But yet there were a lot of other people, like in the addictions field and a lot of other places that were coming that we totally missed because we couldn't see really beyond those words that he was talking about, the specifics of it. So what I see today, you know, in the world is that you can see the effect of just getting caught up in thought because nothing changes. You know, like we all know that this is a really important time for us to see how to come together and change, but nobody can because they can't see that it's their thinking that's blinding them. They just can't see that. And so people, we all get frustrated, like, let's do something. Oh my God, the planet's burning up. Oh my God, my kids aren't going to have a planet. You know, everybody gets really insecure, but that's not the way to change the world. You have to go to that deeper state of well-being. You know, when you're talking about love, I know that if you think about it, really, that's just a word. The best word we have that describes this incredible state of consciousness that each one of us are. And so we all know that that's what we are in our deepest state, but to be able to recognize that that's on the inside and not on the outside is what this conference is really about, is trying to share that with the world. That we all know, like everybody knows, I mean, not everybody, but I guess most people can agree that we're in a bleak place right now in terms of the planet. But people either get angry or they get upset, they get frustrated, they get afraid instead of getting quiet. And that's where that consciousness comes forth, is out of that place where we get out of our fear. You know, fear is just the thing that tricks us into trying to fix what's already happened, what's already been created. If we're going to change something in the world, we have to get before what's known to see something totally different. And who knows who that will come from. But if we put that out to the world, that this is a possibility, that everybody has this, and we could come together at that place, we can definitely do amazing things, and we can change things. There's I was just going to read, I got a thing about Syd also. It's a little paragraph that in Syd's last talk that I was not able to attend, my friend Judy Sedgman, who's a award-winning journalist, wrote a beautiful synopsis of the day. And we handed this out at our very first conference for the Three Principles Global Community. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read the section about changing the world, because I think it's really, really powerful. Syd talked about the principles and told his story again. He talked a lot about levels of consciousness and innocence, about how important it is to see the innocence in all that is going on in the world and in our colleagues and our friends and our family. He said the world is at a dangerously low level of consciousness, and it would be easy for us to get alarmed and to try to change the world before it's too late. But he reminded us that it isn't how the world changes. The world only changes when one person at a time looks deep inside and touches a moment of pure consciousness and has an insight, and then looks out and sees a different world. He said he was really confident now that nothing could stop this work, and that it would go out in the world very soon in a big way. He said we need to be ready and remember that the purity of our understanding is the vehicle for change, nothing more. We can only change ourselves. We can't change the world, and we can't change other people. We can only get our minds very still, very pure, and then work through that feeling to lead others to their own wisdom. Like that just gives me hope to know that we're pointing people in the right direction, and that's all we can do. That's all we can do, is to keep doing that and to live from that understanding ourselves. Yes, there's a little message up here. Can we cut a copy of that? I'm gonna try to have Bonnie put the whole thing up on the website as a way to get people interested in this, so it'll be available. But it's just such a, like, I remember another time I was talking to him, this was a long time ago, maybe it was in the 80s, and we were walking on the beach in Maui, and I was very upset at the time about what was happening in the world and with the climate. I was like so frustrated that nobody was doing anything or listening. And I said, well, and he said, oh, don't worry, dearie. The level of consciousness will rise and people will do something. I said, well, what if it doesn't? And he said, he sighed and he said, oh, well, consciousness will just recreate itself somewhere else. It'll be okay. And, you know, that doesn't make me happy, but it gives me peace. Like, okay, we have to do our best, but yet we'll be able to overcome our weaknesses if we don't. So it's just kind of knowing that we just have to keep moving in the direction of that truth that's within everybody, and know that it's within everybody, and trust that somehow Mother Nature, that life will take care of itself, that somehow things will happen in a way that will facilitate that shift as best we can.
Here's just a little example of this for me, how this played out. Before I met Syd Banks, I used to think that it was critical for me to look at everything on the news that was going wrong with the world so that I was well informed. And I also believed that my anger and hurt and upset was a badge of honor. It was something I could wear proudly to show you. I want you to know how miserable I am about life and about what's happening in life. And meeting Syd and his pointing toward fundamental facts about all of us, we're always thinking. Whatever thought arises in your mind, you will feel and experience. So for the first time, I started seeing in real time that my anger and hurt and frustration was being created by my thinking and not by what was happening in the world. I also began to see that the more I held on to that thinking, the worse I felt. And the worse I felt, it started having an impact on my relationships and my parenting and my kids. And I was becoming someone who complained more and more loudly about the state of affairs in the world. Now, just beginning to get a little sense that thought was creating my experience, I started seeing that if I really saw, now Syd promised this would happen for anybody, if you really see that it's thought in the moment creating your experience, it's human nature to let go of what's causing us our own pain. Like if you're hitting yourself on the head, if you don't know that you're doing that is causing your pain, you'll keep doing it. And then somebody says, hey, what are you doing with that hammer? And you go, what hammer?
Mhm.
And you go, oh my God, you don't need a technique. You don't ask somebody, how do I set this hammer down? It's like, ow, and you put the hammer down. Well, that's what started happening for me with thought. I'd see myself and I'd be going, ow, 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 thinking it was the world. And then I went, ow, 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 oh my God, it's thought. And Syd says, if you really see that it's thought, it brings you back into the now. It brings you back to happiness. Now, again, happiness is just a word, but think of happiness as just the freedom of thoughts that torment us, weigh heavily on us. Now,
What you just said, Dicken, I think is really great, because I think a lot of people will think, yeah, I know how thought works. I know how thought works, but they're really not in that feeling. They're really not happy. And then they go searching, right, out in the world again for
yes.
something to do to get it back.
Oh, I did that for years. I go, I know it's thought. And then I'd spend a lot of time thinking about the principles,
Mm-hmm.
right? I wasn't dropping into this wide open receptive state where wisdom can help but to respond. I was still thinking about
Mm-hmm.
myself or my life. So I thinking about the world and then thinking about myself. Oh, I know it's thought. Dicken, just drop it. You know it's thought. You don't have to keep thinking this. It's just
That's right.
you know, I've used the metaphor, you put your hand on a hot stove, the instant you know your pain is coming because your hand is on the hot stove, you don't rely on any instructions from anybody or techniques. Your hand comes off. That's common sense.
Mm-hmm.
What I was doing with my thinking was I'd taken all my hands off, but maybe a finger or a finger because I'm going, okay, I know it's thought, so stop it. You know, you don't have to keep thinking about this. And okay, now what am I going to do about this problem?
Yeah.
And so this was something Syd emphatically said over and over again in so many different ways. Anytime we see that our own upset is being created from within via thought, there's a natural tendency for human beings to let go of what's self-inflicted suffering. And then at some point, any human being, this is what I found out for myself, resting in the now, my personal thinking would always begin to settle down and quiet down. And in that quiet, for no reason, I would start feeling better. And when I felt better, I responded to difficult situations way more creatively and responsively. So I'm watching the news, and I used to get really bummed, and then I'd be bummed for long periods of time. Now I meet Syd Banks, he points me within and goes, Dicken, it's all thought. If you see that it's thought, it'll bring you to the now, pure consciousness. As soon as anybody touches that space, something new and fresh must come in, because that's why this deeper intelligence is called wisdom. It knows how to bring us feelings that uplift us and allow us to live more gracefully in life. And it brings us thinking that's creatively responsive to difficulties that are in front of us, whether it's a screaming kid, whether it's a person insulting us, or whether it's the environment on fire. And so then what would happen was it just started boggling my mind, is that when I started feeling upset about what was going on around me or in the world or in my relationships or with my kids, it almost immediately was just a simple signal about now's the time to close the laptop of your personal mind. You can't find answers there. You stay caught and bogged down in the limitation of your personal thinking. You won't find peace, joy, love, insight, inspiration, motivation, aspiration, creativity, solutions to problems, deeper feelings of peace, joy, love. All the things he said human beings are looking for can't be found by just using your intellect more strongly, thinking about things. And so then I'd see something horrible on TV, and the opposite would happen. I wouldn't lean into my thinking. I'd fall out of my thinking, and my mind would quiet down. I'd be peaceful, and then I didn't bury my head in the sand. It was then easier to respond to my kids. It became easier to respond to the environment on fire. Which I have has done all kinds of things, not through effort, but just out of moments of quiet, falling more deeply in love with the world, invoked. Syd says, if you touch this quiet space within, the principles reveal themselves to you. You don't find the answer, it comes. New feeling, new perspectives on situations, new responses that surprise the heck out of you. Right? So it's that kind of shift. If we touch that inner space of silence and no thought, that shift happens, a shift that raises our level of consciousness, and we literally start bringing more love and understanding into the world. Literally. And that shift then, the last thing I wanted to say about this, the shift has a ripple effect. If you sat in my house when I was upset with my kids, and then I fell out of my thinking, and my whole state of mind shifted and changed, and I felt more peaceful and more loving, you watch how just that alone would affect my kids. Or the cats or the dogs or my wife. So, and then they get affected. So they suddenly settle down and become calmer and kinder. And then that affects their friends. And so there's shifts of consciousness brings change in the physical world, in the world of form. But then Syd talked about another level of change, which gave me even more hope for the world. He says there's an evolution or a change that happens before time, that's not of time, and it's spiritual, and it's instantaneous. so that we have this inner shift in consciousness. It's not only affecting people around us, but instantaneously it's changing the ecosystem of the universal field of consciousness in which we all live. And it's helping, as Syd would say, to raise the overall level of consciousness of humanity. Literally, I had no idea, even until like 2 years ago, I hadn't seen that deeply, insightfully. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, like a ton of bricks. And then I immediately got in touch with the people running the conference in London saying, I want to give a talk on healing the world. I just had an insight about how each of us, through shifts in consciousness, can help create an overall level shift in the whole of humanity, and how hopeful that is if you see that truth for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great, Dicken. You know, it's amazing to me how easy it is to get afraid and then think you need to do something. You know, in the world, like I remember the same thing happened with me with the news. And before I learned the principles, I was like, you know, really angry and upset, and I'd watch the news every night. And I started learning about the principles, and I started quieting down. And I remember I'd be watching like Taxi at 5:30, and then Taxi, the show Taxi was a funny show, right? And then it would go into the news, and I could feel my whole body react to it. And I thought, quick, turn off the TV, you know. And now what's nice about knowing that that state of awareness and consciousness is a place to live is that I can watch all the crazy stuff that's happening in our country, and it's fascinating to me. Like, I think it's fascinating. I don't get bummed out by it unless I'm, you know, thinking about it too much. But it, you know, it's like, it's really fascinating to me to see how, in the spite of all this negativity, there are pockets of truth coming out. There are people awakening around the world, that there's this thing that's happening. And if we focus on what's not happening, it zaps all of the energy and it takes us in the direction of the negative. But if you focus on places where people are awakening and things that are happening, and focusing on that, that gives you such hope. Plus you can see how what you're saying happens. It's like, to me, it's like the lava in the volcano. It comes from the core and it comes out, and it comes out in different ways. You know, it's like these little streams that are kind of going underground and pop up in the most unusual places. And of course, where we're looking is, we're looking, at least I'm looking, for people that are leaders or people that are, you know, in more influential places to be awakening, and that's not happening. So if I focus there, then I lose that feeling. I get caught up in that world because that's already created. So if we're going back before thought, we're going back to that place where form hasn't happened, then we can bring forth something different. And that's the only way, because once you focus on what's already created, you're too late. It's already created. We can't change that. We have to go back to change it before the fact. Yeah. And, you know, I think that for me anyway, sometimes I feel like I should be doing more. Like, I think a lot of people feel this way, like, I got to do something. I got to go and get involved in something. And so I do, you know, I do that too. Like, whatever comes to me about what seems to make sense in the moment, but I don't lose my mental well-being in doing it. Like, that's the most important thing to me, because touching people and reaching people at that level is the only way this is going to change, the only way. And, you know, like Dicken was talking about, it's like, if you're walking around in a really beautiful feeling in that place of peace and love, and you, let's say you know, talk to the grocery clerk and you have a nice conversation with him, and both of you kind of have this great feeling. I mean, who knows? Maybe he doesn't go home and beat his wife that night. You know, maybe he goes home and reacts to his child in a different way. Like, it's just this, the feeling that goes out. Like, you know, you can see when somebody wakes up, like, especially like in, like with the clients that I work with, a lot of people I work with are pretty significant issues and problems in their life. And when they wake up to this, you can see their parents change and their friends change. Sometimes not only positive, they get afraid, like, what's going on here? But you can see that it's hitting them, like they're reacting. There's something that's happening. And so to me, as this consciousness arises in the world, there's going to be kind of a backlash to it. There's going to be this kind of a lower level of consciousness is going to respond with insecurity and trying to hang on to what they're familiar with and what's known. But eventually, because we're all part of this deeper consciousness, that should affect them in a way that shifts them too. I don't know.
I've had a lot of clients that were afraid that if they lost their anger and upset about things in their relationship or their family or their community or the world, that they would become passive and they wouldn't care.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, that's ego's version of what happened. That's a fear-based belief that hasn't been my personal experience, and it's not the experience that I see happen with the thousands of people that I've been sharing this with, is that when we wake up out of thinking that burdens us, we become unburdened, more present, more awake, and more creatively responsive to pain or suffering that's in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
So very, very simply, my kids are acting out. I'm caught up in my thinking. I'm really upset to begin with. Now I'm even more upset, and I act out of that toward them. It's not pretty. Now, with a little understanding, and this started happening to me very quickly when I learned the principles very quickly. I get upset. I see its thought. I pause for a minute. Just coming back to the now for an instant, and my feeling is different. And then I don't deny what's happening in front of me. I don't avoid it. I don't not see it. But wisdom brings a response to my kids that comes out of love and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So my kids started saying to me after a period of time, "You're different. You and mom are different than the parents of all of our friends, because as soon as they're upset, they react and act out of it. You guys don't do that anymore." Right? This was about a year after we started living with this understanding. They say, "You just don't act on that anymore." And so it's easy to talk to you, or it's easy to hear what you have to say about what we're doing because of where you're saying it from.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that logic applies to anything.
Mm-hmm.
We don't become blind or deniers to suffering. We become more compassionately responsive to the suffering that we see.
Mm-hmm.
Simple example, Syd Banks walks into a group of us, and one person was really having a rough time. He immediately noticed that that person was having a rough time. No judgment. He didn't come up and go, "It's just thought, dearie," right? He just sat down quietly next to them, and he was in a very, very peaceful, open, loving space. In no time at all, the person next to him picked up on that, was affected, and changed.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
Mm-hmm.
Other times he may say something, or other times he may just love the person so much he'll go, "I know they'll get over it," and leave them alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like there's a set thing or way to do it, but also what I do know is when people's heads clear and they touch this space that's free of that thinking, there is a shift in our feeling and knowing that allows responses that are more loving and more compassionate. And
Mm-hmm.
boy, talk about what the world needs at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And we can each, in a sense, be a living catalyst
Mm-hmm.
for that kind of change in the world. Very hopeful, again, hopeful.
It's really kind of, it's a paradox, isn't it? Because it's like the more we want to change the world, the more we have to get quiet about it. And that, like, so many people think that that's not the way to do it. You know, like, you got to figure it out and do it. And you got to, like, they're waiting for an insight to come to tell them what to do, rather than seeing that it'll happen just by getting quieter, just by going into that state of mind at a deeper level. Like, I'm always amazed at how that works in people, and in myself and in others. But you can feel it, like when you're walking around and you're in a deep state of consciousness, people around you are like, hi. There's this whole nother experience you have than when you're walking around with a busy mind. You're just not as connected with anybody or with life in that way. So as we get quieter, the outside changes. I remember Syd, in one of his tapes, he said, when you turn around and you touch consciousness, he said, then you turn back around and you look at the world and you see a different world. You know, and so it happens. It's like you're not doing anything. There's nothing that you're trying to figure out how to be or how to act, but really just trusting that as you quiet down and you let consciousness bring forth your wisdom, that it brings forth a feeling within you that you can't create. Like, you can't think your way into that state. There's no way. It's like two different things, right? Like George used to always say, the best feeling that you can create with your thinking is excitement, because you have to keep coming up with things to get excited about, to have a positive thinking about. But that's not the feeling we're talking about. We're talking about something much deeper, where you know you're connected to mind. You know that you are that energy that's within everybody. And as soon as you see that, then your fear goes away. And you're able to connect with what we call love. You feel such a beautiful feeling. And that beautiful feeling is different than just like, oh, I love candy. You know, it's like, it's that's why sometimes I think the word love is like inadequate, because we have so many thoughts about what that is. But it's really that state of connection with the world. And when we're connected with the world, we feel the trees, we feel, you know, people say you're at one with the ocean, or you're at one with but that's true. It's like we all are the same thing. So that, for me, like, that's just, I try to remember that. Like, I even do that, like, in my business. If we get short of cash or something, and people will like, oh, we got to hurry up and see more clients and work more and do something, I go, no, I'm going to take a week off and go to Molokai or something and relax. And I remember people like, what? You're doing what? And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to like mellow out and forget about it. I can't do anything about it. And inevitably, something would shift, right? Something would shift and my reality would change. And that's kind of the thing that we have to see, is that our reality, our families, our relationships, the way that we are with everybody changes from the inside. That really truly means that when we touch that consciousness, it changes the reality. And you don't have to do anything. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to do any of that, because it'll all come. Everything you need will come to you.
I'd love to hear from anybody if you're hearing something that it resonates, feels good, is helpful, or if this has invoked a question. Is that all right, Chris? We've got 15 minutes. I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking at the questions here.
Okay.
Yep. Anybody got a question or a comment, their insight?
Yeah, if you do, feel free to either raise your hand or you can unmute yourself as well.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, Deborah.
Hi. So it's not fully formed, but Christine, what you were just saying about the letting go, and Dicken, what you were saying about when you start to realize that what you're thinking is like putting your hand on a hot stove, and that you naturally start to take it off when you realize it hurts. I'm having trouble connecting the two because it's so compelling to think about letting go being, kind of a state of being into, sort of, I don't know, figure it out. And yet there's nothing natural in me about that feeling like a hot stove. It's such a habit to like want to do something. I wonder if you guys could talk about the interconnection of those two. Yeah.
Well, for me, I mean, I don't really think it's about letting go. I think it's just about seeing that it's just thought. Then who cares about it? It's just, it's just this magical, mystical gift that we have to create what we call thought. But thought's not real. It has no form. It's just part of the energy of life as it comes through us. So, like for me, I had a lot of attachment to what I thought. I thought I wasn't very smart. I thought then I think I knew a lot. Like if you asked my husband, he would say that I thought I was right all the time. And I told him it was hard for me to tell because I was right so much that it was hard to tell when I wasn't. But, it's this, we have this relationship with this gift because we didn't know what it was. We didn't know that it could have lots of errors. It's like that, like I always say that the reason we have an eraser on pencils is because we know that we make mistakes when we do arithmetic and mathematics, and we all do that. We don't even think about it, yet the thinking we do about the rest of our life seems like it's all true and good. So to me, it's just like I make so many mistakes with my thinking. I'm wrong so much, it's pathetic. So I don't care about it anymore because I know it's this beautiful gift that, thank you God, lets me get home at the end of the day, and I can go to the grocery store and pretty much remember what I need to get, and I can use it to do things that I need to do. But it's not what I am. It's just this thing I have that allows me to create a really nice life for myself. So you can't not have it. It's just part of the gift of life that comes through. And sometimes what comes through is really good. And sometimes what comes through is not that good. But so it's not like letting go, because that involves thinking, right? Then you got to figure out which thought it is and what to let go and what it means and whether it's true or not and all that kind of stuff. But it's just a thought. So who cares about it? So for me, it's like the feeling I have is just absolutely that the guide for me. Like if I'm really in a quiet, beautiful feeling, I just let it come through me. I just listen myself. It's like what's coming through me is good. If I'm not, I take it with a grain of sand, man. It's like, who knows? And it's not me. Like I'm not my thoughts. It's just something that happens from memory. Just like, it's just like when I ask Siri for questions, sometimes she gives me these ridiculous answers, right? So I wouldn't like run my life based on what Siri said. But sometimes, she's right and she'll tell me what time it is or what day it is, or, it's all good, but sometimes it's not that good. Now I know that about Siri, but I didn't always know that about my memory. I didn't always know that about myself. So it's just a different relationship with it, that's all. So just don't worry about letting go, because there's nothing to let go of.
It's cool. Thanks.
I had a client when I was first starting to, she had been my client in more traditional work, and then she was my client after that. And she said to me, she said, Chris, you keep telling me it's just a thought, it's just a thought. She said, and I feel like I'm hanging on to a cloud, and if I let go, I'll fall like in a dream. And I said, oh, that's okay, because clouds don't really hold you up. You have your own wings and you're holding yourself up. It's okay. You can let go. But that's kind of that fear does that. It makes us want to hang on to our thinking like there's some value in it. But I mean, and I'm not to say that there's not value in any thought, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's when we get afraid, those thoughts are the ones that we want to just see them for what they are. Little con artists. Anybody else got something?
Thanks, Deborah.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Nice to meet you, Deborah.
Eric, you're on.
Hi, Dicken. I loved what you said about when we become unburdened, that we become creatively responsive, and that it doesn't mean becoming passive. I mean, I'm one of those people who has begun to get more active in reaction to the climate crisis and all the rest of it. And I do find that, like everybody, I waver between getting upset and beginning to respond from that place, but then also coming back to that place of peace and creativity and responding from there. And I'm curious about something that Chris said about Mother Nature, and Mother Nature I forget the exact words, but basically sort of has this covered. And what I'm curious about is whether what we're nudged to do in that creative way is to do with us being nudged by Mother Nature to do what's right in our particular moment of now in response to what's going on in the world.
Oh, it is being nudged by our true nature.
Yeah, Mother Nature is just another description of that, of mind, of the life force, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things about the very nature of life, it's formless and it gives birth to everything. So mother has been used as a metaphor of pure consciousness, pure mind, pure thought is what gives birth to our experiences and to everything in nature, everything in life. And that in a sense, when we let go of all of our thinking of fixing, changing, manipulating, controlling, stopping, dropping, all of that thinking, this deeper knowing does the job. It's a deeper knowing that can completely bypass the intellect. You can just know what to do without even thinking about what to do. You drop thought without even thinking about dropping thought. Mm-hmm. You get new thinking without even thinking about getting new thinking.
Mm-hmm. Or wanting it.
We can see this. An example I like to give, Erica, that's so simple. We go to cross a busy city street. And we all know that if we're too caught up in our thinking and distracted and we try to cross the street, we're in trouble. It's common sense. So nobody says it's too hard to drop thought. I don't know, I can't do it. I can't stop worrying. We just drop into the now. And in the now, this deeper knowing tells us when to go, how fast, when to slow down, when to speed up, and we don't even have to think about it. Mm-hmm. See, I did not know until relatively recently that I don't have to be thinking about how to live my life. If I have enough trust and faith in this deeper intelligence, when I'm out of the way, it lives me perfectly. Mm-hmm. Perfectly. I've responded to my kids in loving, compassionate ways without going, now, what did that book say I should do? And what did Syd say I should do? And how should I do this? And what's the right way? And oh my gosh, I don't want to blow this. It's just, I get quiet and respond. And you start seeing that that's the knowing that, in my mind, Syd was saying, is inside all of us, and it's waiting to burst forth and guide us, so that when we're in harmony with the principles, that this deeper nature lives us perfectly, knowingly, wisely, lovingly. Good news. Good news.
Thanks, Dicken.
You know, the other thing too, I was just thinking about is that, like, don't get confused too that, you know, that there's a way to do this. You know, like sometimes people think that being loving means that you're always like, you're coming from a soft, sweet, nice kind of feeling. But I'll tell you this, I had many conversations with Sidney Banks when he was not in that place. And I definitely got what I needed to hear from that. And sometimes it's like it comes through us in a way that's perfect when we're not trying to be in a high level of consciousness, or we're not trying to, you know, act like we're in this deep feeling, but it's just being yourself in the moment and coming from the most secure place. Like, to me, that's the most important, is that I'm not afraid, that I'm in this place of security, and then that knowing comes out of me. And what the way that we talk to people or what we do may not be all, you know, because a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to just walk around and be happy all the time. Well, that's not the point of this. It's that you're secure and you're doing what that deeper consciousness is kind of showing you to do, like allowing you to see what to do. So you just get to be yourself. Like Syd told me that the very first time he called me. He said, Dearie, would you like me to help you? And I was like, yeah. And he said, okay, well, just be you. I thought, well, who the hell is that? I've been trying to figure out that for 30 years. And that's really what this is about, is we're all just getting to just be ourselves. Because what we all are is that beautiful intelligence. And we all know how to live our life. And we all know what we have to do if we slow down. Like that, to me, that's the fun of teaching this to people, is that I know they know. So thank God I don't have to know. But if they know, then my job is just really to help them to see what they already have within them. And how that comes out. I mean, I work with people that are, like, I have this new client who's a meth addict and a crack addict, and he had some really awful experiences. And he told me that in the middle of a meth-induced psychosis, he had this experience where he realized that he wasn't that psychosis. He said, and I know that was God. I know that was that part of me that was God. I was like, right on. I mean, you don't have to be like quiet on the beach for, you know, this consciousness to come through you. It's always there. Always there.
There's that hope again. That we're a thought away from an openness that allows something new and fresh to come through. It's so hopeful. And the deeper you see that, the simpler all of this seems. It's not complicated. It's such a simple truth. Understanding leads us to wake up to the now. We start living more in the now. There's less thinking and more wisdom. Less thinking and more love. It's really simple. Syd would say over and again, look for simplicity. If things start feeling complicated in your life, guaranteed you caught up in all kinds of complicated ideas, and they're conflicting with each other in your head. And you're trying to figure out which of these conflicting ideas is right. But as Chris beautifully said earlier, when this feeling of fear and conflict and struggle and difficulty and complexity hits, is just letting us know we're caught in our intellect in a way that's not helpful, and we're a thought away from the now. And in the now, all of that begins to quiet down on its own, not by my doing. Right? That's why we use the snow globe analogy. You set it down. Any doing you do is shaking the jar again. Then you set it alone, leave it alone, and it just is built to settle, quiet. So Sid would say that's what we're looking for, a quiet mind. Why is that? Because in a quiet mind, we become more wisely responsive to life. And it doesn't look like anything we can imagine because it's completely new and fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Not an idea about how we should be. That's a really good point. You know, even when he was talking about looking for a feeling, one time Syd Banks said, you know, there's really no word in the English language to describe this feeling. Mm-hmm. Because it's the feeling that's there when you're not in your ideas that label things. Mm-hmm. You're not in your conceptual mind. We can retrospectively say, well, it's peace, joy, love, courage, determination, resolve, clarity. We can put all kinds of names on it. When I drop out of my thinking, I don't care what it's called. Mm-hmm. There's a different feeling, responsiveness, awareness, responsiveness. Mm-hmm. That's there always. Yeah. That more and more we can blind faithfully depend on.
I was just thinking when you were talking about that, in fact, when you are in that, you're not thinking about it at all. It's only when you're not in it that you want to be in joy and peace and love, right? It's only when you're not experiencing that. When you are, it's a wonder of the world.
Yeah. Beautiful. Great place to wrap things up. Hey, yeah. What I'm going to do is in the chat section. How do I do this?
While you're doing that, let me say something here. Is it that I just want to remind everybody as much as possible, if you can let people know about this conference we're having, like people not in the principals, we really want this to go out beyond that. So whatever efforts you can do to draw other people in, that's really how we're, the more people we can, that can awaken to this, the better shot we have, right?
I'm trying to, Bonnie, maybe you can help me with this. I'm trying to cut and paste the
web page for the conference?
The link to the 3pgc.org 2020 online conference.
I'm going to do that for you.
Yeah, thanks. Just take a look at it. I mean, it's the list of speakers alone and the topics, phenomenal. And we wanted to price it as absolutely reasonably as we could. Thank you. Bonnie has it up there now in the chat.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to just click on that and take a look.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris. So fun doing this
Great.
with you. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for getting
fun.
First thing this morning.
Oh, actually, this is late for me. Usually I got to do it much earlier than this. I
see the coffee mug and the dog. So.
Yeah. My husband, I said, you have to be home today. Take these dogs.
Hey, thank you so much.
Bonnie, thanks. Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Aloha. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Hey, and I just want to let everybody know the next webinar is on February 12th, and it's with Marnix Powells. I hope I said your name right, Marnix. Forgive me if I didn't. But anyway, thank you for joining us live, and hope to see you next time.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Aloha.
Bye.